kitchen light hums, talking to the ceiling, like it answers back some. Same old doubt, pacing in my head. Then your voice cuts through. Let's turn the tide instead. You only podcast, rewire my mind. Tiny words making waves over distance, over time. You only podcast, but it feels like home. Tune in, lean in, press play, and I don't feel so alone.
What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the You Only Podcast. I'm your host, Lo Jackson. As always, if you've been here for a while, you already know we do not do surface level healing. We do the kind that rearranges the furniture in your brain pretty much, knocks over a few emotional lamps, and then somehow makes the house feel like a home again. And thank you for tuning in, all of you. And before we get into it, I want to say thank you, truly, to my number one fans. All 721 fans. That number really matters to me because it means there are 721 human beings chose growth over scrolling, chose reflection over distraction. And if you're new here, welcome. You're not late. You're right on time, and thank you. I appreciate you, each and every one of you. So today, we're talking about the 4 stages of healing, like I spoke about in my last episode. And this framework shows up across trauma, psychology, grief, and recovery science.
Stories of scars turned into soft gold, laughing through the hard parts, heart getting bold.
So grief is a motivated state to bridge the distance in time and space, and yet it's impossible. And so the process of grief is a gradual waning of that motivation and a gradual shift of the memory of the person into some concept, whether or not it's a soul, whether or not it's just the past, whether or not it's their energy. Again, it depends on what the forebrain of that particular person believes. Shifts that concept of that person into a place where the brain is comfortable. There's no more autonomic arousal. There's no motivation. And we've all experienced this.
It's not helpful fluff. It's a map, and like all good maps, it explains why sometimes you feel even lost when you're moving forward. Quick funny moment before we dive in. Healing is the only thing where you can cry, journal, meditate, go to therapy, drink water, take a walk, and still feel worse for a bit. And people will be like, "Have you tried yoga?" Yes, I have tried everything short of screaming into the void at a Whole Foods. So let's get grounded with facts. According to the CDC, about 61% of adults in the U.S. report experiencing at least one adverse childhood experience. That includes abuse, neglect, household dysfunction, or chronic instability. Roughly 1 in 6 report 4 or more. Those numbers matter because research shows that 4 or more ACEs dramatically increase the risk of anxiety, depression, substance use, and chronic illness later in life. Healing isn't luxury, it's neurological maintenance.
Whatever you try to hold on to, the nature of thing is that this is happening.
Swinging away.
It's going to move away from you. And whatever you try to avoid and push away from you is just a question of time until it's going to move like pretty close towards you. If you don't want to have a life that is too shaky, don't touch the water. Because in the moment you touch, your touch is the initiation for the ripples to appear. Same way, you want to follow that goal. You want to have it easy along that goal. Don't touch any additional water along your goal, which ultimately means your energy is being just drawn away from your initial goal.
Stage 1 is stabilization and safety. And the authors of this book really took everything they knew, because as of 2025, these authors contribute, or their contributions of the 4 stages of healing framework are recognized for bridging the gap between biological repair and clinical practices. Gregory S. Schultz and Robert F. Diegelman, widely cited for their work and principles of wound healing, are credited with defining the modern biological sequence as a set of highly integrated and overlapping phases rather than isolated steps. They use proliferation, remodeling, inflammation, and all kinds of different theories and scenarios. Their research highlights how specific chemical signals like PDGF and TGF8 act as master controls that trigger cellular migration and collagen production.
Start understanding quantum physics, you realize that everything is energy and nothing is separate. And then when you realize that they can measure your brain waves with a magnet that doesn't touch your head, you realize that your thoughts are not in your head. And they're part of this greater field that we are all connected by. And they're now trying to understand how we actually store memories, which is a developing process. Some of it is protein-based, and some of it is this theory that we basically store our thoughts in the cloud. So basically you're accessing your own Wi-Fi field. And this is why there is a difference of like meeting somebody in person versus doing something over Zoom. Our biofields are interacting right now. There are low-level frequencies that our brains interact on. So having that biofield, you realize that like you have your own biofield, you are your own Wi-Fi, you emit your own Wi-Fi. And so then thoughts can be the process of some of that Wi-Fi coming in, mostly directed as life force and energy, which is why like how you practice your energy and how you maintain your energy can really direct how your thoughts come out in your reality, because it's that life force that then drives a chemical change in the brain that then drives forth whatever is going to come out as like a conscious thought or a verbal thought or anything like that. But when you realize that it's the energy that comes first, this is why stuff like meditation could lead to manifestation, because you have to correct that frequency signal and then it'll actually correct your physiology. And I literally went through my own personal experience of this, because at one point I talk to people a lot about allostatic load, and it's this concept of when your body becomes overwhelmed. I just had so many things going on in my life on like a physical level, a chemical level, and a mental level. My body got overwhelmed. My immune system was starting to act in autoimmune type ways. I basically became allergic to all food. This is how I know sensitivity to supplements really well, is being made sicker by being put on supplements and medications, and my body was just rejecting all of it. And so I finally got to this point where I was at a loss, and the only thing I had left to do was listen to my body. And my body was like, I want you to sit here and drink water and eat these 3 foods and meditate and do nothing else. So that's basically what I did.
So thank you guys for listening today to the You Only podcast and taking time out of your life to want to learn the 4 stages of healing. And stage 1 of this book is stabilization and safety. This is where healing actually begins. So if you're trying to heal right now, take a moment and really focus on this and try to absorb stage 1 in healing is stabilization and safety. Even though it doesn't look dramatic, stabilization means your nervous system learns that danger is no longer consistent. And that's something I had to learn, because I suffer from PTSD and my brain has been in danger mode pretty much my whole life since my existence. And I've been programmed to see danger before it happens. So here's the science. During trauma, the amygdala, which is the brain's threat detector, and we've talked about that in past episodes, becomes overactive. At the same time, prefrontal cortex, which is right above your eyebrows, the part of your brain responsible for logic, planning, and impulse control, goes offline. Healing starts when we calm the amygdala enough for prefrontal cortex to come back online. And this stuff takes years. This don't happen overnight. And maybe it does for some if you're able to get into a type of situation to where You're not forced to have to go to work every single day, maybe a clinic even. Neurochemically, this stage is about lowering cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and increase GABA. GABA is a neurotransmitter that acts like the brain's brake pedal. It slows things down. In past episodes, we've talked about grounding techniques, breathing work, routines, and boundaries. That wasn't random. That was stabilization. When I've talked about learning to pause instead of react, that's this stage in action, pretty much. If you're listening and thinking, why can't I just talk about my trauma already?
You only podcast, but it feels like home. Tune in, lean in, press play, and I don't feel so alone.
I'm a psychologist, and I want you to imagine for a moment that you have this injury that's not healing. If anything, it's getting worse. So you go to a doctor and they clean it up, stitch it, bandage it, maybe even give you medication. But does the doctor actually heal that wound? No. Your body does that. The doctor just creates the best conditions for your body to heal itself. And it's the same with therapy. We work to understand that injury in detail so that we can help you create the conditions that are optimal for healing. But just like all healing, it can't be rushed. It takes time.
This is why a dysregulated nervous system can't process. It can only survive. And that's a lot to do with stage 1, and that's stabilization. And that was one of the first techniques I had learned in my healing process, is once I removed myself away from family members and people that were constantly creating situations and, rumors and reputations, and then got around people who didn't know anything about me but loved who I was, I realized I was worth something. And that was stage 1 of my healing process. So it could be that you listen or read that chapter and really focus on where you need to get stabilized in your life and write it down. How am I being stable today? What am I doing to calm my nervous system and stop the negative neurochemical transmission that I have created? Because this is on us to heal. It isn't the outside world. Though that's the problem, is the outside world putting so much pressure and emphasis on people that never were programmed to be able to handle that kind of pressure. And stage 2 of this book is awareness and acknowledgement. This is where insight shows up. This is the, oh, that's why I do that phase. Strategically, studies show that people who can accurately label their emotional experience reduced amygdala activation. So that process is called affect labeling. Affect just means emotion. Labeling it literally calms the brain, and it creates an awareness when you do that. And that was the next stage I had gone through when I started to really come to terms with why things went on for me and why I get upset. Because in past episodes, you can hear the pain in my heart, it's there, but I've learned to work through it to the point I know why those things went on. These people weren't given the tools to raise kids. They were raised with people who were worn, torn, stricken, and not educated in the area of raising proper kids, I'm assuming. I don't know all the facts, like everything. Our perception is pretty much curved by our upbringing. So, in plain terms, naming your pain takes away some of its power. And that's what I had to do. I had to name the pain and put labels on it, write it down, go back and look at it, even as painful as it was, because that stuff is painful. So, this is where Oprah comes in. Oprah has highly openly talked about realizing trauma wasn't just happening to her, but it shaped her beliefs about worth and safety. She has said that understanding the story you tell yourself is the beginning of changing it. And that's stage 2. And that's why I had said in past episodes, every day I talk to my little self, to reassure him, hey, you're never going to be hurt again. It's okay. We've hit this in earlier in on the You Only podcast episodes when we talked about patterns, self-sabotage, and why over-explaining is often a trauma response. And I suffer from that. Awareness doesn't fix things overnight, but it gives you a flashlight in the dark when you're not sure where you're going or what you're doing and why you're feeling the things you felt or why did the things happen to you that did. You have to have a flashlight. And a lot of times in my life, my God was my flashlight. And he always came through, and that's why I have the heart I have today. So, stage 3 of this book is processing and release. This is the stage people quit in because it feels worse before it feels better, and it does. It went on for me for years, the pain and the aloneness. And I'm coming out of it finally. I understand, why I had PTSD and I thought the cops were coming to get me for 38 years of my life. Seriously, every day. That's how traumatic the police were in my life in the 90s and 80s. And it's crazy. No kid should ever have to feel that way. No kid should have had to have been treated that way by police or anything. I once got a call. I moved to a different town 30 miles away in 3rd grade, and the police had called my house, and I knew the cop, and he said, well, I have a report that you were shooting people with a slingshot today, Lo. It come to find out it was another person with my same name, first name, and he was doing that stuff, and his reputation preceded me all my life, and he always blamed all this stuff on me for some reason. And, that's how I live. Processing means allowing emotions to move through instead of staying stuck. And like that PTSD moments I had to learn to allow emotions to move through me instead of staying stuck in me. And they stayed stuck in me for a long time. And that's what PTSD does to people. Emotion, by definition, is energy in motion. And we have to remember that. So when it doesn't move, it turns into anxiety, depression, or numbness because we're inside of our heads or we're inside of ourselves. And another way to be present and get away from that stuff is a tool I use. I name 5 things I can see. I name, 4 things I can hear, 3 things I can smell, 2 things I can touch, and it brings me back to the present reality. So practice that if you're having rumination and things like that going on. Neurologically, this stage involves the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is the part of the brain that lies to us and makes things up and exaggerates. That's the part of the brain that organizes memories and time. So the time frames blend together or bleed together. Trauma fragments of memory. Processing helps the hippocampus file experiences correctly so they are remembered as past events, not current threats. This is also where neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine start to rebalance. Dopamine isn't motivation and reward. Dopamine is motivation and reward. Serotonin is mood stability. When people say therapy is exhausting, it's because your brain is literally rewiring itself. A lot of times people that walk into a church that haven't been to church in a long time, you'll see them and they'll start crying and then, they'll never come back because they don't understand their emotions. When you walk into a church and you start crying, that's called conviction. I never got it. Why people didn't get them at the door and tell them, hey, you're literally letting go of a lot of stuff that you are not able to on your own. That's what that stuff's about. Getting with a group of people and being able to release. And we've talked before about grief, anger, and allowing yourself to feel without judging it. And that's one of the most important things is allowing yourself to feel anything you want to and not judge yourself, because we are the worst judgers of ourselves more than anybody in society, and that's not weakness when we judge without feeling or thinking something about it. That's release. So stage 4 of this book is integration and reconnection. This is really important, you guys, because this was the part in my healing where I realized, hey, them people did love me in the only way they knew how. And they came up at a different time when we didn't have all the tools that we have today and all the information isn't passed along so easily. And So stage 4 is integration and reconnection. This is where healing becomes embodied. You don't forget what happened, but it no longer hijacks your reactions in any situation in life. Because, remember to yourself, I am soft, I am calm, I am kind at all times to all people, no matter what. And that's a phrase that I use to heal myself too during this time when I was um, integrating and reconnecting. And research shows that people who integrate trauma rather than avoid it show increased activity in the medial prefrontal cortex. And that is so important because that means your prefrontal cortex is literally finally coming online after building such a wall around your brain that no one could get through. Teachers, oh, you show such potential. And, it didn't matter because you were trying to protect yourself. That's the area involved in self-awareness and emotional regulation of the brain. And it's highly important that you have that self-realization that you're thinking not in the middle of your brain, but be able to realize that you're using those two objects that feel like they're right above your eyebrows. And it's a different feeling when you think through them, medial lobes. Integration means you stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what happened to me? And why did I learn? Because a lot of people don't. They're stuck in these brains that are so encased in technology, trauma, fear, regret. So, before we close, here's the reminder. Healing is not linear. You don't graduate from these stages and never return. Life will test you. Old wounds will knock. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. And that's why they talk about temptation in religions. Deny the flesh. Deny those things that everybody is doing because society wants those things to be running free and wild. A lot of things were meant to be private and not run free and wild. But if this episode resonated, please like, follow, subscribe, and share it with someone who's doing the work quietly. Growth loves witnesses. And to all my supporters, thank you for showing up, for listening deeply, and choosing healing even when it's uncomfortable, because I've learned in my journey, 14 years of abuse, healing starts when we start with self-awareness, self-realization. I am enough. I am enough for me. I am enough for the world. I may not be a famous rock star. And understanding, the 7 deadly sins, understanding the 10 commandments, finding truths that were here before you that are good instead of being overcome by gluttony and easy access to everything that makes a human being miserable, but a human being don't realize it until it's too late. And a lot of us are so overwhelmed by systems. We think this is a great life and we're living great. And we are. Some of us are. That is true, but some of us aren't. So, if the 4 stages of healing resonated with you, please return for my next episode. Pass this episode along and give me whatever stars that you feel is what I'm worth, because I'm here trying to help you. You're the one that matters. You only. And this is why we're doing this podcast, because I know I'm not alone now. I have 1,300 followers right now that I'm just grateful for. And people are watching my episodes 20,000 a day, 50,000 a day. It's crazy. They may not be following or liking or subscribing, but they're listening. They're healing. And they know somebody that needs to hear this. So, again, thank you. And until next time. Fan members, do not let the past pains, present hurts, and handicaps of the moment stop you or impede you from your purpose and personal development.